Man, when it rains, it pours in the world of wrestling. And today we have a horrible case on our hands, talking about Jimmy Snuka, who was arrested for manslaughter. This is a case that's over 30 years old, dates all the way back to 1983, back before even WrestleMania, when Jimmy Snuka was one of the largest stars in the wrestling world. And this is a case that's been talked about. If you're a longtime wrestling fan, or if you've seen a lot of older shoot interviews with a lot of the stars of the 80s, this is one of the questions, like when RF Video talks to these guys, they always ask them about the Jimmy Snuka case, because it's just always one of those things that's always hung over, wrestling. Everyone's always wondered if Jimmy Snuka was always able to, get out of this because of his fame at the time, because of his high-flying moves. This would be about the time when, Jimmy Snuka was climbing up the top of the steel cage that Mick Foley always talks about, when he's main eventing the Madison Square Garden shows. Jimmy Snuka was just one of those guys that just everyone knew. By the time WrestleMania came around, WrestleMania 2, that is when Snuka's star was starting to fall. It fell all the way to the point where I believe he had his last WrestleMania at WrestleMania, is it 7 or 8? Whatever it was, he ended up being the first guy to fall to The Undertaker on the long streak. But this was a case that was recently reopened last year. One thing leads to another, and basically a piece of paper turned up in the autopsy that was ruled that this death of his girlfriend at the time was called a homicide. So they reopened the case and they dug through it, and it turns out that they're going to press charges on Jimmy Snuka, who was arrested today, and he's taken into jail to serve his case and see if he's going to be able to be proven innocent or guilty, or however it all turns up. But this is a case where basically Snuka said that he came home from a show. He went back to his hotel room where he found his girlfriend, and she was out of breath, and I believe he said that she had like a yellow sort of ooze coming out of her nose and her mouth. Snuka, this is how it gets weird, because there's police reports that say that Jimmy Snuka had told a certain number of people that he was in an argument with his girlfriend early in the morning, where he shoved her and she fell and she hit her head. Later, when asked about this due to the police, Jimmy Snuka said that those people had misheard him, and that they were driving down the road to get to the show. They had stopped off on the side of the highway to take a leak, and basically when she got out of the truck, she fell, and she hit her head there, and he had nothing to do with it. There's a lot of stories about Snuka. I mean, I don't want to put names into this story, but there's a guy that I listen to on a podcast who's pretty famous in the wrestling podcast world, that just talks about Jimmy Snuka is not one of the guys that you want to hang out with late night. He gets these crazy eyes, and it just gets to a point when you're like, okay, I need to back out of this room because stuff's about to go down and I don't want to be a part of it. No doubt in my mind, Jimmy Snuka is one of the biggest stars to ever wrestle, but I think that honestly, when it comes down to it, I mean, if WWE at the time, or WWE now, I apologize, is going to have Hulk Hogan basically vanished from everything that's a part of it, I would not be surprised if they step up to the point where they're removing Jimmy Snuka's name from every piece of history on WWE.com as of right now. This is too bad. Of course, his daughter Tamina is involved in the Divas Revolution right now. She does the top rope, Jimmy Fly Super Snuka, the frog splash, whatever you want to call it, off the top rope. They had her on Tough Enough, where she was hitting all the people with this move coming off the top, and really putting it over that she was Snuka's daughter, and I guess now it's she's just Tamina. But this is a case. I mean, you go back, you watch those old shoot interviews, the guys have no problem saying something happened in that room. I mean, she, came out, when you look at the autopsy pictures of her, she's got cuts all over her body, her face, her arms, her hands, her legs, her butt. She didn't fall just one time on the side of the highway. Something happened. That's what New Jersey's going to have to prove against Snuka, and we'll see where this case goes. But it seems like as of right now, they mean business. Snuka's behind bars. Well, it didn't happen as fast as it did for Hulk Hogan, but today was the day that Jimmy Snuka was removed from WWE. It basically sees that WWE is giving space between him and Jimmy Snuka. He'll always be looked at as one of the biggest marketable stars and one of the biggest attractions of all time in wrestling history. But Jimmy Snuka is going to be given the same treatment as so many people are latching him on to Hulk Hogan. But honestly, in my mind, what Hulk Hogan did was wrong. But what Jimmy Snuka did more than likely, if everything pans out the way that the case looks on paper right now, Jimmy Snuka did the same thing that Chris Benoit did. It might not have been to his family, like when Chris Benoit killed his wife and his kids, but Jimmy Snuka did kill his girlfriend at the time. I mean, this has been something that's really been widely speculated about, for years. I think everybody saw the story yesterday where this murder dates back to 32 years ago, and basically new evidence that has come out has sort of pinned Jimmy Snuka into the corner, and the courts are going to go after him, and now we're going to have to see how this pans out with the legal system. But today, WWE released a statement saying that Jimmy Snuka is now not having a Wrestling Legends contract, and he is currently being removed from all media platforms pending the outcome of the case. I'm thinking that when it comes to the WWE Network, I think if you still go up to like a WrestleMania, Jimmy Snuka will still be involved inside of that match. They'll have the same sort of banner that comes up when you watch a show with the Chris Benoit matches. Like the most probably famous match you can think of for Chris Benoit would be the WrestleMania 20 main event. When you click on WrestleMania 20, right before the show starts, it says that everything is being shown in its original form, and WWE says that it's a different time and place. I can't think of what the thing says off the top of my head, but it has a warning that comes up basically saying like, hey, the guy who killed his family is going to be on the show, and we're just not changing the history of what happened. But I think that if you go through, a lot of times what WWE uses for their thumbnails of their shows is what the pay-per-view poster was. Much like if you go and you look at what the SummerSlam 2013 poster of the guys riding in the roller coaster, it's got CM Punk on it. But now if you go to the WWE Network, you'll see the same picture, but CM Punk's been removed. He fell out of the roller coaster, I guess, and he's been replaced by, I think, Daniel Bryan. I'm thinking that if any of those thumbnails ever, had Jimmy Snuka involved in them, he would be taken out, and then they would put something else in his place, or they would just choose a different picture. Nothing off the top of my head I can think of uses Jimmy Snuka on there. But I'm sure that if you go and you watch any of the old countdowns that might have included, Jimmy Snuka highlights, or talking about Jimmy Snuka, like I'm not 100% sure, but I know he's a part of the greatest wrestling superstars of the 1980s. He was involved in that list. If you have the DVD, I believe that documentary has been added to the Beyond the Ring feature. I'm sure that if you watch that, he'll still be featured as being one of the greatest wrestling superstars of the 80s. Just, they're no longer going to be kicking in the Legends deals where they're going to be selling his merchandise. They've had some Jimmy Snuka t-shirts up in the past, and they're no longer going to be giving him royalties for those or anything like that, of anything that's coming in, whatever the Legends deal was for. But we're going to have to see how this court case plays out. Jimmy Snuka is 72 years old. He's already battling stomach cancer. Who knows how long this court case is even going to last. Maybe they go in and this is an open and shut case, and Snuka really has no line of defense. The stories that have come out, basically Jimmy Snuka has 5 different stories of what has happened, and hopefully Jimmy Snuka can remember what he said in his past interviews with the police, and hopefully all of those interviews match up, and when he's interviewed again and gives his final story of everything, that everything has been done under oath. Hopefully they can't come back and say that under oath he's changed his story anywhere along the way or anything like that. And I don't know. It's hard for me to say that I'm pulling for Jimmy Snuka to come out with this, because honestly, when I read the stories and everything that comes out to it. I don't know if maybe it's just written a certain way to make it look like Jimmy Snuka is, guilty as all. But from being a wrestling fan and watching a lot of wrestling shoot interviews and hearing this story over years, it's always sort of been portrayed that Jimmy did it. So we'll have to see what goes down with this one. But Jimmy Snuka removed from his Legends deal, removed from WWE.com, and officially removed from the WWE Hall of Fame page on WWE.com. Hey, what is up, everybody? This is Stevie Breach coming to you. Just got out of the gym today. This video is going to come off like a commercial for the Wrestling Observer newsletter. Honestly, right now, one of the hottest stories that there is in professional wrestling is going on outside of wrestling. It's going to be soon being involved inside of a courtroom, and that is the Jimmy Snuka upcoming murder trial, where he just recently was charged with the murder of his girlfriend for over 32 years ago. Something that I'd always heard, the whispers, and I've heard the stories inside of the shoot interviews. Basically thinking that, something happened inside of that hotel room and the full story never got out. Honestly, I thought that, because of the case never going to trial, that there was not enough evidence. But due to today's Wrestling Observer podcast, where they had Irv Muchnick on, a guy who wrote, I don't know whether to call it an article or whether to call it a book or what it was, but he wrote something called Justice Denied, talking about the case and how it just was not handled right. He was a guest on today's Observer. He was the guest for about 58 minutes of a show that was just over an hour. They packed in a little bit of WWE and MMA news into the back half of the show once Irv was off at the show. But honestly, in my mind, this was one of the best Observers that they've ever done. And one of the shows that I'm really grateful to say that I have a subscription to. I thought that I had went out and I'd read a lot of articles trying to get as much information on this story. I even went and I watched the Jimmy Snuka shoot interview through RF video that I believe was filmed back in the I believe it was right around the 2000 era, somewhere 98, 99, 2000, 2001, somewhere in that pace. Is when it happened. Well, no, because they talked about the Chris Benoit match at the very end, so it has to be at least after WCW died. But it really wasn't that great of a shoot interview. When it comes to shoot interviews, Snuka is one of those guys who comes off as doesn't really have a whole lot of stories about the things that went down and everything. How was it working with Hulk Hogan? Oh, it was great. How was WrestleMania? Oh, it was great. Just, one of those interviews where you're just watching it and you're just like, good God, somebody paid $20 to have this DVD. At least tell us something, man. Make something up if you have to. But then when the situation comes up where they ask him about the case, he just sort of stares at him with this. You can see just within just a snap of a finger, Snuka just flips. He basically shoos it off, saying that he doesn't want to talk about it, but you can see the demeanor on his face just change, and it just isn't it. I don't know how you can watch the Snuka shoot interview without buying it through our video. Maybe you can go and find it online. Maybe somebody's uploaded it onto YouTube or onto Daily Motion or something like that. If you dig for it, odds are, my guess is that you'll be able to find it somewhere. But honestly, it's not even really worth your time to really check out. But I'm going to link the podcast down below. And you have to buy a subscription to it. But even if you only buy a 1 month subscription, even if you only buy a 1 month subscription just to listen to this one show, I will honestly tell you that it's well worth this one show. You'll get so much information. Maybe if you don't like reading, the other day in, I believe it was the Tuesday updates on the Observer, Dave listed like 5 articles to go read. Some of them were written years ago. Some of them were written that day, just talking about the court case and about how things have been mishandled. In this podcast I listened to today, They talked about how, I didn't even know, Don Morocco and Mr. Fuji were both in the room when the cops came to investigate the scene. Mr. Fuji is known as one of the guys that kept his job in WWF for so long because he was a guy that was able to clean up situations. It made me remember a lot of the guy on Breaking Bad that sort of was the ex-cop who went around and he cleaned everything up. He did what he had to do to make sure that they could keep making money. And that was how I was thinking of Mr. Fuji at the time. But I didn't know that anybody else was in the hotel room. I thought that maybe wrestlers might have been staying at the hotel, but I didn't know they were all together. But basically when the cops came, there was no drugs to be found. It just was the body of the woman. And the question's always been out there, if they would have called the cops sooner, because the indication is that the problem happened either the night before or in the early morning. Then Jimmy Snuka left. He went to go do interviews throughout the day. He came back. He got ready. He went out and he wrestled a match that night and then came back to the situation that was at hand. And, who knows what would have happened if they would have been able to get her to a hospital and maybe had a doctor look at her and be able to fix her up. Maybe she'd be alive today to tell her side of the story about what happened. Basically, Don Morocco and Mr. Fuji are the ones that went and told Vince McMahon. He had left where they had, shot the TV taping where Snuka had wrestled the match that night and was driving back to go to the WWF offices where he had to turn around, and he went back to personally himself handle the situation of, what was going on with Snuka. And Snuka in his autobiography, a book that I bought just the other day, I went onto Amazon and I bought a used copy. Well, I bought it secondhand. I bought a new copy that somebody was selling for $3 with $3 shipping. So $6 for a hardcover book. A pretty good deal, especially when it's sort of in the limelight of, why this case is going to trial, just because Jimmy Snuka has told so many different stories over so many different times. The cops want to get to the basis of trying to figure out what is the real story that happened and maybe see if they, mishandled the situation. But in Snuka's book, he even put it into writing that, Vince McMahon came and picked him up and was driving him around town, and he keeps mentioning he had this briefcase. Who knows what was in that briefcase? If your mind jumped like my mind when I heard about this, my mind is that this is a briefcase full of cash that Vince is going to hand off to somebody to make sure that one of his biggest stars at that time would be able to keep going on. Much like Andre the Giant, Jimmy Superfly Snuka was one of the greatest attractions of all time. People would go to the matches just to see Jimmy Superfly Snuka, jump off the top rope, doing the big frog splash, and the oohs and ahs of everything that would go on. When this happened, Jimmy Snuka was at the peak of everything that was going on. In this podcast, Irv Munchtek, he plugs his ebook. You can go to Amazon and you can buy this story/book, download. All of the money goes to take care of, I believe he said, battered women. He doesn't make any money off of the story that he wrote. The book/story, it's only $3 for a download, knowing that it goes to a good cause. If you want to know more about the Snuka story, download this. I think I'm going to be doing it. I don't know if I'll do it today or the next day, but this is a story that I really want to know as much as I can about. And for $3, it's worth the gamble to see what's going on with the story and everything that happened over years. Basically, he wrote this article, I believe, years after there was no justice in the story, and even now, here we are 32 years later, this is getting uncracked. Go listen to the podcast that I listed to below. If you want to know more, go over to Amazon, buy Justice Denied by Irv Munchtek. Only $3 for a download. Probably going to be well worth it. And, find out everything you can know about this case because, like I said, it's one of the most talked about things in wrestling as of right now. A former legend actually getting, he's going to be going to trial for murder charge. Weird, huh?